Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Saturday, February 21st, 2026. The world outside is doing its usual chaotic thing. I mean, algorithms are optimizing, the markets are fluctuating, and everyone is trying to predict what happens 5 minutes from now. But in here, we are slowing things way down, we are dimming the lights, pouring a metaphorical drink, and we are, engaging the time drive.
That's right. We are leaving the 21st century completely behind for the next hour or so. We are setting the dial for a rainy Monday night, October 24th, 1966, to be precise.
Now, for anyone new to the Deep Dive, here's the deal. We take a stack of sources, articles, archives, transcripts, and we pull out the absolute gold. We do the heavy lifting so you don't have to. And tonight we are looking into the unknown. We are talking about the actual mechanics of how reality gets built. We're talking about remote viewing way before it was cool. And we were talking about, psychic detective work involving comic books.
It is a really strange mix, I'll grant you that. But that is the beauty of the source material we are covering today. It's gritty, it's domestic, and yet it is profoundly metaphysical.
We need to be specific here because we always cite our sources. Our source for this deep dive is session 296 of the early sessions, book 7 of the Seth material. This session was recorded, as we just said, on October 24th, 1966.
And just a quick housekeeping note before we really get into the weeds. This deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn, to explore, and to question the nature of our reality.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's 1966. We are in Elmira, New York. We are sitting in the living room of Rob Butts and Jane Roberts. Jane is the writer, Rob is the artist. They are a typical bohemian couple of the era, just trying to make ends meet. But when the lights go down and Jane enters a trance state, she speaks for an energy essence personality known as Seth.
And we have to clarify for you right off the bat, Seth isn't just some spooky voice rattling chains in a haunted house. He is a teacher. He is explaining physics, psychology, and consciousness with the absolute rigor of a university professor, but with the humor of a guy holding court at a local bar. And in this particular session, session 296, he is weaving together three wildly different threads that seem completely unrelated until you look closer.
It really is a grab bag tonight. We have a prophesied job offer in New York City involving a Dutch uncle. We have a ghost, or rather a consciousness, giving a critique of a shower scene in a comic book. And we have a psychic travelogue of a vacation in Nassau.
It sounds like a fever dream, doesn't it?
It really does. And it begs the question for you listening right now. Can a dream you had 5 weeks ago literally get you a job today? And on the flip side, can a consciousness without a physical body read your mail? And not just read it, but actually critique the art style.
We aren't just looking at parlor tricks here. That's the key takeaway. We are looking at Seth using these small, everyday domestic events, paying bills, checking in on friends on vacation, to explain exactly how consciousness manipulates physical reality. It's like a cosmic how-to manual disguised as a parlor game.
So let's unpack this. We have to start with the job offer. This is section 1 of our deep dive, the mechanics of probability.
Right. So let's look at the context. Rob Butts, who Seth always refers to as Joseph, is an artist, a painter. But like many artists in 1966, or 2026 for that matter, he has to balance his passion with paying the bills. On Friday, October 21st, just a few days before the session takes place, Rob gets a surprise phone call.
From an old friend, Bill Ward. Now, Bill Ward is a legend in his own right in the comic world, known mostly for his pinup art. They used to work together in the industry way back in the early 40s.
Exactly. Bill Ward calls him up completely out of the blue and offers him some commercial artwork, specifically inking comics. Now, Rob hasn't done this in years. He's surprised. He thinks, wow, what a lucky break. What a massive coincidence.
And this is the first real insight for you. The trap of thinking in terms of coincidence. Seth, almost immediately upon coming through Jane in the session, shuts that thinking down entirely.
He does. He essentially implies that luck is just a lazy word we use when we don't understand the mechanics of cause and effect. He says, and I'm paraphrasing the vibe here, Joseph, there are absolutely no accidents. But let's look at the actual quote because it is the foundation of everything Seth teaches regarding manifestation.
What does he say?
Seth says, your own wishes, expectations, and attitudes gave rise to this assignment. You did this quite unconsciously, and you made the contact in a dream.
You made the contact in a dream. That is a heavy statement. It implies that the networking event didn't happen on LinkedIn or over the phone or at a cocktail party. It happened while Rob was asleep.
Precisely. Seth is introducing the concept of dream incubation, or dream mechanics. He explains that Rob had been broadcasting a specific desire into the universe. He wanted to see if he could make money doing art that wasn't his serious painting, just to pay the bills. But he didn't want to leave his current town. He wanted the work to come directly to him.
And the sources show that Rob actually has receipts for this. He checks his dream notebook. That's the incredible discipline these two had. They documented everything meticulously.
He really does. He finds a dream from September 13th, 1966. That's about 5 weeks prior to the job offer phone call. In the dream, he returned to comic book work. He was sitting at a drawing board, smelling the ink. He literally felt the visceral experience of the job.
And then there was another dream just 10 days before the session where he dreamt of moving closer to New York City, which is where the comic industry was based at the time.
Right. Seth points out that the dream was, quote, loaded with psychic energy and literally produced reality. This is the big takeaway for you as the listener. It wasn't just an idle daydream. It was a projection of intense intent.
So Rob wanted an opportunity to test himself, to see if he could handle commercial art again. And his consciousness went out, connected with his old friend Wendell Crowley and Bill Ward in the dream state, and nudged the physical reality into place.
Exactly. It's fascinating because Rob didn't call Bill Ward. Bill Ward called him. But Seth is saying Rob made the call psychically first. The physical phone call was just the echo of the psychic action that already occurred.
We tend to think the physical world is the real world, and dreams are just fantasy or random brain firings.
Seth completely inverts that. He argues the dream world is the planning room, the architectural blueprint stage. The physical event is just the construction crew arriving later to build what was already designed in the non-physical.
Now here is where it gets really interesting, and honestly a little funny. Seth doesn't just explain how Rob got the job. He starts acting like a career counselor. He starts making highly specific predictions about where this new gig could lead.
This is the Dutch uncle bit. It's so oddly specific. Seth tells Ride to write this down. He predicts a future office on 42nd Street in New York City.
42nd Street. That was the absolute heart of the publishing and comic world back then.
It definitely was. And Seth describes a man there. He says, a man with short gray hair, somewhat portly, but with a boyish type face.
I love the detail. Somewhat courtly, boyish face. It's so visual. It feels like a character description in a screenplay.
And then comes the warning. Seth says this man could become a Dutch uncle if Rob isn't careful.
A Dutch uncle. You don't hear that phrase much anymore. It basically means someone who is stern, candid, maybe a bit overly critical, right? Like a mentor who absolutely doesn't sugarcoat things.
Exactly. It's a very specific dynamic to predict for a freelance gig. Seth is basically saying, hey, you manifested this job, good for you, but be careful because if you go down this path too far, you're going to end up in a stuffy office on 42nd Street getting lectured by a portly man with gray hair.
It's hilarious because it shows Seth isn't just a mystical entity spouting vague philosophy from a mountaintop. He's looking at the probable future and seeing literal office politics. He's seeing the mundane reality of dealing with a difficult editor.
It really grounds the experience. It tells us that spirituality isn't just about achieving nirvana, it's about navigating your actual career and daily interactions. But then, and this is so typical of the Seth material, we pivot from funny office politics to something incredibly profound and, frankly, a little chilling.
You're talking about the connection to Wendell Crowley.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Bill Ward, the guy who offered the job, mentioned on that phone call that their mutual friend Wendell Crowley had recently suffered a terrible tragedy. His 10-year-old daughter had died of a heart attack while playing softball.
God, that's awful. A heart attack at 10 years old while playing outside? That's the kind of thing that makes you question the fairness of the entire universe.
It's unimaginably tragic, and Rob was obviously very shaken by this news, but Seth addresses it head-on in the session. And this is where we have to suspend our modern materialist judgment for a moment and try to understand the metaphysical framework Seth is operating in. We are just imparting what the source says here.
Right. Seth doesn't just offer standard thoughts and prayers. He offers a deep metaphysical analysis of their soul contract.
He says, the Crowley girl, for various reasons, sacrificed herself for her father, and she did this with full inner knowledge.
Whoa. Okay, let's pause there for a second. That is a massive concept to drop into a conversation about comic book jobs. Sacrificed herself? It implies that the death wasn't an accident in the spiritual sense at all.
Correct. Seth suggests that on a soul level, not the conscious, walking around ego level, but the deep inner self, there was a prior agreement. He mentions that in a past existence, she had actually been his mother. He says her leaving was intended to push him towards something he must still do to advance his own spiritual development.
It fundamentally changes the entire view of tragedy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It moves it from a random, cruel universe to a complex, purposeful spiritual drama. Now, whether you subscribe to reincarnation or not, the framework Seth provides here is intense.
It is, and Seth is very matter-of-fact about it. He treats the death of a child and a job offer for comic book inking with the exact same level of analytical precision. To him, they are both just events in consciousness, woven together by intent, probability, and agreement. It's a difficult pill to swallow for our human ego, which generally wants to believe we are victims of circumstance, but Seth empowers the individual to a frightening degree. He basically says we choose it all at some level.
It is really heavy stuff, but it highlights the sheer range of this single session. We go from Dutch uncle office bosses to life and death soul contracts in the span of just a few minutes.
And we are only just getting started, because now we move to section 2 of our deep dive. We are leaving the realm of probability and prophecy, and we are entering the physical realm of object reading, the envelope test.
Yes. This is my absolute favorite part of the session. The envelope test feels like classic 1960s parapsychology lab work.
For those who don't know the background, Rob Butts used to test Seth's abilities regularly. He was a curious guy, a natural skeptic at heart. He would take a random object, wrap it in heavy Bristol board so you couldn't feel the shape of it, seal it in a double envelope, and then ask Jane while she was fully in a trance, as Seth to describe it. Jane had never seen the object beforehand.
It's a classic psychic testing protocol, psychometry, reading the residual energy of a physical object.
Exactly. So for this particular session, the object is a bill, a receipt from a place called the Art Shop. Rob had gone there earlier that afternoon to buy supplies, specifically pencils and paper stumps, to do the very comic book job Bill Ward had just sent him.
Okay, I want you to visualize this bill. It's printed in dark blue ink on bright yellow paper. It has a big serial number printed in red. It's a completely standard piece of commercial ephemera from the mid-60s.
Right. So Seth starts describing it through Jane, and he gets some physical hits immediately. He mentions a border. The bill has a printed border. He mentions vivid verticals. The bill has a grid designed for itemizing purchases. He mentions blacks that speak loudly.
Which Rob notes is the dark blue ink looking almost completely black against that bright yellow paper. So visually, he's somehow seeing the receipt inside the opaque envelope.
Correct. But then Seth goes off script. Or rather, he goes much deeper than the visual script. He starts sensing things that are not printed on the paper, but attached to the energetic history of the paper itself.
He says he senses a hole or grave or something deep.
And a mistake or error.
Now, a skeptic would look at that and say, oh, those are just vague guesses, classic cold reading techniques. But let's look at the facts Rob dug up and verified.
Let's start with the hole or grave. The proprietor of the art shop, a woman named Marjorie Buck, had recently lost her husband. He had died. There's your grave. The deep grief was psychically attached to the location where the bill was issued and therefore attached to the bill itself.
And the mistake or error.
This part is wild. Jane had actually been to that exact shop about 5 weeks prior. She had a confusing, frustrating interaction with Marjorie about cans of gesso. She went to the shelf where the quart cans usually were, found only pint cans, had to search around the store. It was a minor but distinct error in the normal flow of the shop.
So Seth is reading the emotional residue of the shop owner's grief and Jane's previous frustrating visit, all just from holding a folded-up piece of paper.
That's the direct implication. Psychometry isn't just reading ink on paper, it's reading the electromagnetic imprint left on the object by the people who handled it and the environment it was in. It's like the object is a magnetic audio tape that continuously records everything that happens near it.
But then, oh man, that gets even better. This is the part that genuinely cracks me up. The comic book bleed-through.
This is fascinating mechanics. So remember, Rob bought specific pencils with this bill, and he used those pencils later that day to ink a comic book story for Bill Ward.
Right. The bill is the receipt for the tools that were used to create the art.
Seth holds the bill, but he starts describing the narrative content of the comic book that the pencils drew.
He says connection with ablutions or washings.
Ablutions. Who uses that word in normal conversation? It means washing oneself. It's such a formal, archaic term for taking a bath.
And he says, the entrance of an outsider.
So Rob looks at the physical comic pages he's been working on, and what is depicted on the first 2 pages.
A heroine taking a shower.
Ablutions.
And while she's in the shower, a villain, the outsider, is creeping up the fire escape to break into her apartment.
It is so incredibly specific. Seth is describing a classic peeping Tom scenario in a cheap pulp comic book, but he uses this highly elevated metaphysical language to do it. Ablutions, the entrance of an outsider. It creates this hilarious, jarring contrast between high-minded spiritual language and trashy pulp fiction content.
And he talks about blacks that speak loudly. In a black and white comic book, the black ink, the heavy shadows, the thick lines is literally the loudest, most dominant thing on the page.
Exactly. Seth is completely bypassing the receipt, the physical bill itself, and tuning into the creative intent and the future use of the supplies bought with that bill. He's seeing the art that the pencils will create, or are currently creating, in Rob's studio.
It completely blurs the timeline. The bill is from the past, meaning earlier that afternoon. The drawing is happening in the present. The story being drawn is a total fiction, but Seth sees it all as one unified energy signature.
It suggests that objects aren't just dead, inert matter, they are active connectors. The receipt is connected to the pencils are connected to the drawing is connected to the fictional story. Seth sees the entire associative web at once.
And he even critiques the graphic design of the bill itself while he's at it. This is the Jungle Gym comment, which I find so visually interesting.
Oh yeah, that part. Seth says the design of the bill is airy and open, reminding Rupert, that's his internal name for Jane of a Child's Jungle Gym.
Reminding Rupert, that's a really key phrase to focus on.
It is crucial. Because Seth doesn't have physical human eyes. He perceives the raw data, the grid of lines on the receipt, and he has to send that non-physical data through Jane's biological brain. Jane's brain searches her memory banks for a visual match, what has vertical and horizontal lines and is open and airy. A playground jungle gym.
And if you look at the bill, and Rob provides a very detailed description of it in his session notes, it has all these thin horizontal and vertical lines creating boxes for prices and items. It's a literal grid. It looks exactly like a two-dimensional drawing of a jungle gym.
And Seth also mentions a flower-like movement of lines coming down,
which Rob couldn't figure out at first until Jane, while still in trance, gestured with her physical hand, showing vertical lines spreading out from the center. It was a physical, visual interpretation of the grid layout on the paper.
So, to quickly recap Section 2, we have a simple paper bill for art supplies. Seth holds it while it's sealed in an envelope. He senses the widow who sold it, picking up on the grave. He senses the mistake Jane made in the store weeks ago. He senses the shower scene in the fictional comic book drawn with the pencils bought with the bill. And he senses the jungle gym graphic design of the paper itself.
It's an absolute masterclass in how information is stored in physical matter. It strongly suggests that every single object in your pocket right now is like a high-capacity flash drive, constantly recording everything that happens around it and intimately connected to everything it will ever be used for.
That is a deeply provocative thought for you to sit with, and it makes you wonder about the antique furniture you buy or a used car. What massive historical records are permanently stored in those atoms?
We'll definitely come back to that idea at the end. But first, we have to travel to Nassau.
Section 3. The Gallagher Test.
Rob and Jane have good friends, Bill and Peggy Gallagher. They are currently on vacation in the Bahamas, specifically Nassau, while this session is happening in Elmira, New York. They are not in the room. They are hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
And Seth casually decides, I'm going to go see what they're up to right now.
Remote viewing. Although back in the 60s, they didn't really have that cool clinical name for it yet. It was just called traveling clairvoyance or astral projection.
Right. So Seth projects his consciousness all the way to Nassau, and he starts rattling off a series of rapid-fire impressions. Now, unlike the envelope test, he readily admits there is some telepathic static here. Distance, or maybe just the complex translation of raw visual data into English words, makes it a bit tricky.
But the hits he gets are chillingly accurate. Let's talk about the 1461.
Okay, so Seth is dictating and says 1461 and a fountain with steps leading to it, a circular formation surrounded by flowers.
Now, the Gallaghers later returned from their trip and confirmed this exact location. They had visited a prominent water tower in Nassau. It was a massive circular structure. It was beautifully surrounded by flowers, and to get up to it, they had to climb the Queen's Staircase, which are steep steps famously carved out of solid limestone by slaves.
So the word fountain was a slight distortion of water tower. Both involve water, a concrete structure, and verticality. Steps leading to it was a direct, literal hit. Circular formation was a direct, literal hit.
But what about 1461? That sounds like a very specific year or date.
The Gallaghers didn't know what 1461 meant when they were asked, but Seth often picks up shapes as symbols. Maybe 1461 was a physical address they walked past, or a random number carved on a historical stone nearby. Or, and this is just my own personal theory on it, maybe it wasn't a number at all. Maybe the tall tower looked like a number 1 and the structural steps look like a 4. The analytical expert in me always wants to decode that number, but sometimes the static Seth talks about simply turns a geometric shape into a numerical digit during the translation process.
That is a really fair point. It's like looking through heavily frosted glass. You see the rough shape and the color, but the fine details blur into something else. But then his viewing gets a little dark. Let's talk about the murder mystery.
Seth says, a commemoration of a stabbing. It would seem to be the commemoration of a murder to me.
And what were the Gallaghers doing?
They had just passed a specific memorial to Sir Harry Oakes.
Sir Harry Oakes. That was a notoriously huge unsolved murder case in the Bahamas back in the 40s, right?
Huge. It was literally the main topic of their entire trip. They were totally fascinated by it. They had been going around asking locals about it constantly. Sir Harry Oakes was actually bludgeoned to death, not stabbed, though there were post-mortem wounds that apparently looked like stabs. But the core, energetic hit commemoration of a murder was completely dead on.
Seth was picking up on their mental focus. They were consciously obsessed with the murder mystery. So that's exactly what Seth saw shining brightly in their aura.
Exactly. Consciousness is magnetically attracted to intensity. The Gallaghers were loudly broadcasting murder mystery thoughts, so Seth picked that up immediately. It wasn't just the physical geography of the island he was seeing, it was the psychological landscape of his friends he was reading.
And then there's the bullish behavior. This one always makes me laugh because it's so incredibly mundane.
Seth sees an amphitheater in the evening and says, someone behaves in a bullish manner.
And what actually happened that night?
They were at a local nightclub, and there was this incredibly loud-mouthed Englishman. He was whistling, singing loudly with the band, annoying absolutely everyone in the room. He was just barging around the dance floor.
He was a literal bull in a china shop.
Bullish behavior. It's a perfect, almost poetic, metaphorical description of an obnoxious drunk guy ruining the evening vibe.
It's amazing because Seth sees the rigid geography, the water tower, the carved steps, but he also fluidly sees the social dynamics, the bullish drunk, the intense murder obsession.
But we should also definitely talk about the misses, or rather the distortions. This is incredibly important for understanding the actual mechanism of channeled material. Seth mentions stewing. He says they fidget, stew. I do not know if they stew or if they eat stew, you see.
I do not know if they stew or if they eat stew. That is such a brilliant, transparent insight into how this entire process works. Seth receives a raw, non-physical concept, maybe the underlying feeling of heat, mixing, waiting, general agitation. And Jane's brain, acting as the biological translator, has to quickly decide, is this the human emotion of stewing in anger? Or is this a physical bowl of hot beef stew?
Precisely. Seth is a non-physical entity. He deals in direct cognition and pure knowing. He has to forcibly funnel that massive awareness through Jane's biological brain synapses and her limited English vocabulary. It's like trying to download a massive 4K movie file through an old 1990s dial-up modem. Sometimes you are going to get severe pixelation.
So when he says stew, he's giving us the raw, unfiltered data and openly admitting the final translation might be fuzzy.
Which, to me anyway, heavily adds to the credibility of the whole session. If Jane was just guessing or faking it, she'd just say, they are eating dinner. But Seth says, I'm getting a strong signal of stew, and I can't quite place the physical context. It shows a remarkable honesty about the inherent limitations of the medium.
It's the raw nuance that sells it. It's not 100% perfect, but it's remarkably, undeniably distinct.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've gone from dream-incubated New York job offers to psychometric comic book critiques to moat-viewing water towers in the Bahamas.
It's a complete whirlwind. And you have to remember, this was just one single session, just a normal Monday night in 1966 for these two.
If we synthesize all of this, what are we really looking at? What is the core deep dive takeaway for you listening at home?
For me, the first major takeaway is personal agency. Rob didn't just passively get a job offer. He actively created the core probability of the job in the dream state first.
Yes. That completely empowers you. You aren't just a helpless victim of random circumstance. You are constantly broadcasting desires and expectations that eventually harden into physical facts. You are the master architect, even if you are drawing the initial blueprints while you are fast asleep.
The second big takeaway is about physical objects. That yellow bill from the art shop wasn't just a dead piece of paper. It was an active link. It intimately linked The grieving widow, the shelf error, the comic book outsider, and the jungle gym grid design.
It suggests a universe of total, uncompromising interconnection. Psychometry isn't dark magic, it's just reading the natural web that already connects absolutely everything. The hard separation between me and my receipt is a total illusion.
And finally, consciousness simply isn't local. Seth could be fully present in Elmira, New York, and Nassau, Bahamas at the exact same time.
Physical distance is a localized construction. Pure consciousness completely ignores it. We are not trapped inside our own skulls.
It really makes you look at your own daily life completely differently.
It certainly does. It makes you realize the physical world is much stranger and much more intimately responsive to you than you ever previously thought.
Now, before we let you go today, we have to give credit where credit is strictly due. This material, the Seth material, is incredibly vast. We only quoted about 5% of this single session today. There are literal volumes of this stuff.
Volumes upon volumes. And if you found this Dutch uncle prophecy and comic book shower scene analysis even slightly interesting, you really owe it to yourself to go directly to the source material.
You absolutely need to check out the New Awareness Network. They are the dedicated publishers keeping this vital material alive. They're doing the hard work of archiving and publishing these early sessions so we can sit here in 2026 and actually discuss them with you.
And you can find all the books, including the Early Sessions Book 7, which we use today, right at sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Go there, buy the books, read them for yourself. We are just the friendly tour guides here. The real profound treasure is in the text itself.
Absolutely. The visceral experience of reading Seth directly is very different from hearing us summarize it. There is a palpable, transformative energy in those words.
So here is our final provocative thought for you to carry into the rest of your week in 2026.
We saw tonight that Seth could hold a simple receipt for pencils and clearly see a comic book villain peeking through a window. He could see the future story that the object would eventually help create.
So right now, reach into your pocket, pull out your car keys or a crumpled receipt or that old ticket stub you just haven't thrown away yet.
If a vast consciousness like Seth were to hold that specific object right now, what story would it tell him?
Is it telling a story of chronic stress? Of unexpected joy? Or is it perhaps telling a story of a probable future you haven't even met yet?
What exact frequency are the mundane objects in your pocket broadcasting out to the universe right now?
Think about that. We will see you next time.
Good night, everyone.